I found a receipt for a single rose and a bottle of champagne in my husband's wallet, but he never gave them to me. Suspicious, I called the hotel on the receipt and asked, did room 214 enjoy their stay? The receptionist laughed, oh yes, the honeymoon suite was a great choice. My hand shook. That night, I served him a special dinner, with the receipt taped to his plate. His jaw dropped when he realized I knew everything. It started with something small. A receipt. Just a little slip of paper, folded neatly in the back of my husband's wallet. I wasn't snooping. I swear I wasn't. I was doing laundry, and his jeans were on the bathroom floor, pockets still full. He always does that, leaves everything in his pockets for me to deal with. Usually, it's loose change, crumpled gas station receipts, or a grocery list he never followed. But this time, my fingers brushed against something firm and smooth. A neatly folded receipt. I almost tossed it. Almost. But something in my gut told me to look. I don't know why. Maybe it was the way it was folded. Maybe it was just something. That little nagging voice in the back of my head that said, check it. So I did. And my stomach dropped. I stared at it, my heart pounding in my ears. It had a timestamp. 2 nights ago. 2 nights ago, when he told me he was working late. My hand started shaking. I read it again. And again. Like if I stared at it long enough, the words would change. Like I could will it into being a misunderstanding. But there was no misunderstanding. At the very bottom of the receipt, in bold, printed letters, were 2 words that made my vision blur. Honeymoon suite. I had to sit down. My knees felt weak, like I'd been punched in the stomach. I tried to breathe, tried to stay calm. Maybe there was an explanation. Maybe he bought it for someone else. Maybe, no. No, I wasn't stupid. My hands felt clammy as I reached for my phone. My fingers were ice cold, but I dialed the number printed at the top of the receipt. It rang. Once. Twice. A woman's voice answered, bright and cheerful. Hotel Granville, how may I help you? I swallowed hard. My voice came out steady, but only barely. Hi, I was just calling to check on a previous guest. Did room 214 enjoy their stay? There was a pause. Then she laughed. Oh yes, the honeymoon suite was a great choice. They looked so happy. Such a lovely couple. Lovely. Couple. My head started spinning. My stomach twisted so hard I thought I'd throw up right there on the floor. I hung up. I sat there, staring at the receipt, my whole body numb. Then, like something inside me snapped, I stood up. Fine. If he could plan a special night, so could I. I spent the next 2 hours in silence. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't call him. I just moved. I cooked his favorite meal. Steak, mashed potatoes, garlic butter asparagus. I set the table. Lit a candle. Poured wine. I played my role. By the time he walked through the door, I was sitting at the table, waiting. He walked in like nothing was wrong. Tossed his keys onto the counter. Shrugged off his jacket. The same husband I'd known for years. The same man who kissed my forehead before bed, who texted me goodnight when he worked late, who laughed with me over stupid sitcoms. A liar. His eyes lit up when he saw the food. Wow, babe. This looks amazing. He leaned in to kiss me, but I turned my head. Sit, I said. Something about my tone must have tipped him off. He hesitated for a second too long. Then, slowly, he pulled out his chair. I picked up his plate. And placed it in front of him. Right on top of the receipt. His face didn't register it at first. He just looked at the plate. Then his eyes flicked downward. His whole body tensed. I watched his face as realization sank in. His jaw twitched. His fingers clenched into fists. He didn't look up right away. I waited. Finally, his eyes met mine. His voice was careful. Too careful. What is this? I smiled. You forgot to give me my rose. Silence. A thick, suffocating silence. He glanced down at the receipt again, then back at me. I don't know what this is. Oh, you don't? I tilted my head. So you didn't buy a rose and champagne for another woman at Hotel Granville? You didn't stay in room 214? His breathing changed. It was barely noticeable, but I caught it. The way his chest rose just a little too quickly. I leaned in, resting my elbows on the table. Tell me, who was she? He swallowed. It's not what you think. I laughed. Oh, that's good. That's really good. Because what I think is that you took another woman to a honeymoon suite. What I think is that you lied to my face. What I think is that you're a cheating piece of, I didn't, he snapped. You're making something out of nothing. My jaw clenched. Nothing? I picked up the receipt, holding it between my fingers. You bought a rose. I flicked the paper. You bought champagne. Another flick. You booked the honeymoon suite. I leaned closer. Was that nothing? He was breathing heavily now. It's not what you think, he repeated, his voice lower, more desperate. I just stared at him. And then, he switched tactics. He leaned back, crossed his arms. Now he looked angry. Like I was the one in the wrong. You're acting crazy, he muttered. Oh. Oh, that was it. I exhaled slowly. Sat back. Crazy? I repeated. His lips parted, like he realized his mistake. I gave him a slow, cold smile. Right. I'm crazy. Because I found evidence. Because I caught you in a lie. Because I called the hotel, and the receptionist was so happy to tell me what a lovely couple you and your little whore made. His face drained of color. Gotcha. I saw the exact second the truth settled in. His whole body slumped. His eyes darted away. He pressed his lips together, exhaling through his nose. And that's when I knew. I knew everything I needed to know. He cheated. And now he was scrambling. Pathetic. But I wasn't done yet. Not even close. He stayed quiet for a long time. I could see the wheels turning in his head. He wasn't thinking about how to fix this. He wasn't thinking about me. He was thinking about how to get out of it. How to twist the truth just enough so I wouldn't leave. I knew that look. I had seen it before. Not from him, but from people who lie for a living. People who know how to make you feel just crazy enough to question yourself. And I wasn't falling for it. Finally, he exhaled and ran a hand through his hair. Okay, he said. Okay, listen. I waited. He rubbed his jaw. His legs started bouncing under the table. It wasn't what you think. I did go to the hotel, yeah, but it wasn't, I cut him off. Who was she? His eyes flicked up to mine. Just for a second. Then they dropped again. I smiled. Say her name. He didn't. Because he couldn't. Instead, he went for the classic, it was just one night. It didn't mean anything. I laughed, sharp and bitter. Didn't mean anything? I repeated. You took her to a honeymoon suite. I panicked. He swallowed hard. I didn't know what to do. I was stressed. I felt trapped. It just happened. I shook my head. Nothing just happens. His fingers curled into fists. What do you want me to say? I want the truth, I snapped. That is the truth. His voice was rising now. Defensive. I made a mistake, all right? You don't have to. I picked up my wine glass and threw the whole drink in his face. He gasped. The red liquid dripped down his face, soaking into his shirt. His mouth opened, but he didn't say a word. I leaned in, my voice calm and steady. That was your first mistake. He left the table without another word. Walked straight to the bathroom, slamming the door behind him. Good. I needed a minute anyway. I picked up his phone from the counter. He was stupid enough to leave it unlocked. Probably because he didn't expect me to go through it while he was in the shower. I opened his messages. There she was. Samantha. The last text was from her, sent just a few hours ago. I miss you. Can't stop thinking about last time. When can we do it again? I stared at the words, my heart pounding. Then, before I could talk myself out of it, I started typing. Me, hey. It's me. His wife. It took less than a minute for her to reply. Samantha, oh my God. Samantha, I thought you knew. Samantha, he said you were separated. I had to close my eyes. Just for a second. Just to stop myself from throwing the phone across the room. He told her we were separated. He didn't just cheat. He built an entire lie. I typed back. Me, how long? The little typing bubble appeared. Stopped. Appeared again. Then, Samantha, 9 months. The air left my lungs. 9. Months. While I was making his lunches. Washing his clothes. Waiting up for him when he said he was working late. 9 months. Me, tell me everything. And she did. By the time he came out of the bathroom, I had enough information to destroy him. I knew about the weekend trip he told me was a business conference. I knew about the bracelet she bought him that he kept in his car. I knew about the restaurant he took her to, the one I had been begging him to take me to for 2 years. But the worst part? She didn't even know about me. She wasn't some evil, home-wrecking mistress. She was just a woman who got played by the same liar I did. And now? Now I had 2 options. I could leave quietly. Or I could burn his whole life down. I smiled as I watched him walk back into the room, wiping his wet face with a towel. He didn't know it yet. But I had already made my choice. He walked back into the room, wiping his face with a towel, his shirt still stained from the wine. I watched him carefully. He thought the worst had passed. He thought we'd have a fight, maybe I'd cry, and then I'd either forgive him or threaten to leave. He was already planning how he'd manipulate his way out of this. I could see it in his eyes. But what he didn't know, what he couldn't know, was that I wasn't done. Because while he was in the shower, while Samantha was spilling everything, I found something else. A second phone. I had gone to plug his regular phone back in when I saw it, half hidden under some mail on the counter. It wasn't his work phone. It wasn't the one I just texted her from. It was another. A cheap burner phone. My hands had been shaking when I picked it up, but now, sitting at the table, I felt ice cold. I reached into my lap and placed it on the table between us. He froze. For the first time all night, he looked genuinely scared. Where did you find that? His voice was quiet. I tilted my head. You tell me. Silence. Then, carefully, I picked it up and turned it toward him. Passcode? He didn't speak. Passcode, I repeated, voice sharper. His jaw clenched. He swallowed hard. I don't. I held it up, my thumb hovering over the emergency call button. Fine. I'll just take it to the police. His whole body went rigid. And right then, I knew. This wasn't just about an affair. Slowly, he reached across the table, took the phone, and entered the passcode. It unlocked. I yanked it back before he could react. I expected texts from Samantha. I expected maybe some other random women. I didn't expect dozens of messages from multiple women. My heart pounded as I scrolled. Amy. Megan. Rachel. Jessica. Some names didn't even have full conversations, just confirmations of hotel bookings. One message stood out immediately. Unknown number, you're late again. You better not be playing with me. I know where you live. I stared at it. I scrolled up. The conversation wasn't like the others. There were no flirty messages, no dinner plans. These messages were different. Threatening. I looked up at him, my fingers tightening around the phone. What is this? He was pale now. Who is this? I demanded, holding up the phone. He was shaking his head, his hand running through his hair, his breath coming too fast. I can explain, he stammered. I had never seen him like this before. Not nervous, not guilty. Terrified. And suddenly, it hit me. This wasn't just cheating. This was something else. Something worse. I turned back to the messages, my stomach churning. Unknown number, $10,000. You have until Friday. The world tilted. Me, who do you owe money to? He swallowed hard. It's not like that. I slammed the phone down. Then tell me what it is. He looked away. His knee was bouncing so hard the table shook. I had never been afraid of him before. But now? I wasn't sure if I should be afraid for him or of him. I stood up. If you don't start talking, I'm walking out that door, and I'm taking this phone to the cops. That did it. His face crumpled. It's a guy from work, he muttered. He fronts money. Loans. I was in a bad spot. I took some, and now he wants it back. That's all. I frowned. That's all? I repeated. He nodded, too quickly. That's all. I picked up the phone again. I scrolled further. And that's when I found the picture. A photo, buried deep in one of the conversations. A woman I didn't recognize, lying in a hotel bed, unconscious. My blood went ice cold. What the hell is this? I whispered. Silence. I looked up. His face had drained of all color. His hands were gripping the edges of the table like he was trying not to pass out. It's not what you think, he whispered. And for the first time that night, I actually believed him. I stared at the picture, my heart hammering against my ribs. She was young, early 20s, maybe. Blonde hair fanned across a hotel pillow, eyes closed, lips slightly parted. It could have been an innocent photo, except for the way her arm was twisted at an unnatural angle. Except for the fact that she wasn't moving. I looked up at my husband. His face was blank, completely drained of color. What is this? I whispered. Silence. Who is she? I demanded, holding the phone up. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Then he grabbed for the phone. I yanked it away, stepping back so fast my chair nearly tipped over. You don't get to do that, I snapped. You don't get to hide this from me. His hands clenched into fists. You don't understand. Oh, I think I do, I said, voice shaking. First, I find out you're cheating. Then I find out you owe someone money. And now, this? I jabbed a finger at the screen. Who the hell is she, and why does she look? I swallowed, forcing the bile back down my throat. Why does she look dead? His whole body tensed. She's not dead, he muttered. I flinched. Because that? That wasn't a denial. That wasn't oh my god, what are you talking about? Or I have no idea who that is. That was a correction. The walls of our marriage, the last remaining pieces of trust, shattered completely in that moment. You need to tell me everything, I whispered. Right now. He let out a shaky breath. Ran his hands through his hair. His leg was bouncing again. And then, finally, he spoke. I met her at a casino, he admitted. I was gambling. Losing. She was there with some guy, some big shot, real sleazy type. He swallowed. They were doing things. Drugs, I think. I don't know. I stayed silent. The guy she was with owed money. A lot of money. He exhaled sharply. So did I. My stomach twisted. And he offered me a deal. He said if I kept her company for the night, I'd get a free pass on my debt. I felt like the room was tilting. Kept her company? He shook his head quickly. Not like that. I swear, I didn't touch her. Then what did you do? He hesitated. And that's when I knew. There was more. I had already dug up a graveyard's worth of secrets, but there was still more. She overdosed, he finally admitted. She passed out in the hotel room. I freaked out. I didn't know what to do. Did you call 911? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. His silence was the answer. I covered my mouth, trying not to scream. You just left her there? She was fine. He yelled, his own panic bubbling up now. She was breathing. The guy said he'd take care of it. He told me to leave, so I left. I wanted to throw up. You left her with some random drug dealer? I didn't have a choice. His voice cracked. You don't get it. These guys, if you cross them, they don't just let you walk away. Did she wake up? I asked. Did you ever check? He looked away. That was it. That was all I needed. I didn't think. I grabbed the burner phone and my car keys and walked straight to the door. Where are you going? He asked, stepping in front of me. Move. No, I looked him dead in the eye. If you don't get out of my way, I will scream so loud the neighbors call the cops. His eyes flashed with panic. He knew I wasn't bluffing. He stepped aside. I didn't stop walking. Didn't hesitate. I got in my car and drove straight to the police station. I don't remember the exact words I said when I got there. I remember the officer's face when I showed him the messages. When I handed over the burner phone. When I pointed at the picture of the unconscious girl. I remember his voice when he asked me the first question. How long has your husband been involved with these people? Not, are you sure? Not, do you think he's guilty? No hesitation. Because they already knew the type of man he was. And suddenly, I realized. I had never known him at all. They picked him up at work 2 days later. I wasn't there when it happened. I didn't need to be. But Samantha was. She messaged me that night. Samantha, holy shit. They took him in cuffs. Right out of the office. Me, good. Samantha, they said something about questioning him for a missing person case. What the hell did you do? I stared at my screen. And then, for the first time in days, I smiled. I told the truth. It was everywhere. The news. Social media. Everyone wanted to know about the respectable businessman with a secret gambling addiction and ties to criminals. Turns out, the girl in the photo? She was missing. No one had seen her since the night she was with my husband. And whether or not he was directly involved in that? Didn't matter. Because he was involved in something. And I made sure he paid for it. I filed for divorce. Moved out. Cut contact. Some of his friends reached out, tried to defend him. It's not what it looks like, they said. But I knew what it looked like. And for the first time in my life, I trusted my instincts. Because if I had ignored that one small thing, a receipt in his pocket, I might still be in that house, still believing his lies, still living in the dark. But I wasn't. And I never would be again. Some betrayals break you. Others? They set you free.